The Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, we're Ireland's national human rights institution and Ireland's national equality body. So that means we are the southern counterpart of the Equality Commission in Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, whom we've heard from today. So internationally, we're an A status national human rights institution. That means that we have a particular recognition by the UN, a certain status that's given to us by the UN. And then here at home domestically, we are an independent public body that accounts directly to the Oireachtas. So this is very important to us in terms of our independence from government, so that we can actually hold government to account. Our purpose, which is set out in our Act, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission Act in 2014, is to promote and protect human rights and equality and to build a culture of respect for human rights, equality and intercultural understanding. And we do this in a number of different ways, and among those ways is using international human rights law to hold the state to account or to make it responsible for its actions, and obviously doing this by way of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and how it's implemented in a domestic level is one of those ways. So obviously everybody here today is familiar with the convention. We heard very eloquently from Meredith earlier what it contains. I might just kind of re-emphasise what was said already about that. The CRPD, and I suppose it has been compared to a lot of other UN treaty bodies, is a sort of a paradigm shift, because while it doesn't contain any new rights that we haven't heard of already within the other treaty monitoring processes, it does bring, at the level of the UN treaties, it really brings them to a completely different level. And one of these ways is how it's implemented on a domestic level. What it does mark out is, in very clear, unambiguous terms, that the rights of persons with disabilities are human rights. So while Ireland signed the convention back in March 2007, as we know, Ireland is the only EU member state which hasn't yet ratified, and this delay has been hugely disappointing, and I think it's pretty safe for everybody here today to say it's a source of immense frustration. That's certainly very obvious from the kind of language that people are using. We did see the publication by the government of a roadmap to ratification of the convention back in 2015, which was a sort of a stated intention of where they were going. We do know that it was the government's intention to ratify it by the end of 2016, because they've said so several times, and we know that that deadline came and went. I do think it's worth stressing, however, that even in advance of ratification, the effects of the convention have been felt domestically. I do think there's been a kind of a normative shift in a way around attitudes and behaviour on the part of officials. I have witnessed it. I was asked today just to speak about the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission and one article in particular, so that is Article 33, and we know that Article 3 has 3 parts to it, which oblige states to designate a focal point within the government for matters relating to how the convention is implemented. It obliges the state to set out a framework which will include one or more independent mechanisms, and it also obliges the state to involve civil society, in particular persons with disabilities, in the fully participate in the monitoring process. And as we know and has been said already today, participation is not the same as consultation. We're talking about something quite different. In a way, CRPD, as I've said, it does actually sort of shine a light on the other treaty, the UN treaties, in how, I suppose, they're lacking in terms of that domestic implementation committee. So in the Commission, in anticipation of the ratification, which we thought was going to happen any day now, back in 2015, 2016, we commissioned the Centre for Disability Law and Policy in NUI Galway to conduct a study on Article 33 and how it might best be applied, which is this research report here, and it's available on our website. And it was very interesting in terms of it looked at a number of other country models, what kind of mechanisms that they had employed. One thing that we found, I suppose, that surprised us in the Commission was the nature of what the committee calls a disabled persons organisation, which I think we had probably not fully grasped before, and that according to the the research done by the Centre, very few organisations as they exist in Ireland would meet the Convention's definition of what a disabled persons organisation is, which is one where the majority of persons with disabilities, or at least half their membership, are governed, led and directed by persons with disabilities. It's very clear on that. In terms, I might just briefly finish up by saying about the where we are in terms of the legislative programme here in Ireland. So in August 2016, the government published the general scheme of the Equality, Disability, Miscellaneous Provisions Bill, and that was to set out broadly what it was saying needed to be done in advance of ratification of the Convention. It did say in one of those heads about what a national mechanism would look like, and it named the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission as the monitoring mechanism. It named the Department of Justice as the focal point within the state, which was encouraging, that it didn't name a health-related department or a welfare-related department as that focal point. The interesting thing was when this was all, well and good, so far so good, but when the actual bill was published then in 2016, in November 2016, very interestingly, in relation to the mechanism, all wording related to the Convention had disappeared from the actual published legislation. So even though the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission is still the named body, the language is much more broad, which was a concern for us in the Commission. Where next? I will just kind of briefly say that the Commission is not planning to progress setting up the actual committee until the Convention is ratified. And I think that's important given the lead-in time that we've had so far. And that also there are a number of disability-related bodies, monitoring bodies in Ireland. There are a number of different committees. What we're looking at, this is a real opportunity for us to do something very different in the Commission, and the monitoring body that is envisaged for the Convention is going to be something very different to what we've seen before, and that's kind of where we're going forward from now.